look at, is this on? Yes. I look at the audience, and what phrase comes to mind is small but perfectly formed. So nice of you guys and ladies and gentlemen to come out today to visit with me. We're going to do a lot of exploring around about my association with the school and with the show and with you. I was on this very stage almost 80 years ago. You want that? Thank you so very much. Almost 80 years ago that I was in a play put on by the Dramatic Society here at Madison High School. It was a one-act play called The Bishop's Candlestick. And it's a subset of the Victor Hugo book about that period. And I was playing an archbishop, the archbishop. Now, I took that very seriously. I mean, a skinny Jewish kid from Brooklyn playing an archbishop. That's going to be very important. I wanted to do this well. I knew archbishops spoke with great dignity and very softly. So indeed, I stood in this auditorium on this very stage, speaking with all the dignity I could muster, and so softly that in the middle of the play, a voice came from the rear of the auditorium, "We can't hear a thing you're saying!" Which not only disrupted my work as an actor, but embarrassed me as an archbishop. I felt that was so undignified of the audience to treat an archbishop in that way. My other experiences in Madison were many, but I must confess, I was not a great student, except maybe in history and in English and maybe music. I spent a lot of time coming back here in the summers, making up for my defaults in French and math. I loved French. I loved the sound of it. I wanted to recite poetry in French. I wanted to sing French songs. I did not want to conjugate French verbs. But so I came back in the summers and I practiced conjugating French verbs and doing the other things. And finally, in the winter, this is very important, in January, February, whenever it was, of 1940, I graduated. Now, why did I graduate in the winter instead of June? I had a pushy Jewish mother, and when I was in 3rd grade, got them to jump me ahead 3 times to 5th grade, at which point I knew nothing about long addition or girls. So I graduated in the winter of 42, with no great purpose in life, I must confess. So, Dad was in textiles. He was a textile converter. And I thought, okay, I'll go to textiles. And I matriculated at the North Carolina State University because they had a very good textile program, and I was accepted. So I was on my way to becoming a textile tycoon, except it turns out that their rule was I could not start college until the fall, which meant a 6-month hiatus sitting around. And then the third factor came into play, which was a month or 2 before I graduated, World War II broke out. And although I was 16 and a half at graduation, I knew I was going to be drafted. I didn't want to wait around for 6 months. So I said to Dad, why don't I go to NYU for 6 months? I'll take a few credits and they can transfer. And I did. And then when I looked at the coursework I could take, I saw radio production, radio writing. That sounds like a great A and B course. You know, easy to do, fun, I'll do that. 3 months into that, I realized that's really what I wanted to do. So my life changed totally in those 3 months after I left Madison and led me to, in some very strange ways, to become what some of you remember me as. So life, there are very few actual professional things that happened in my life that I planned. I certainly never planned to be a children's host. I had done candid microphone and radio 3 weeks after I graduated college with Alan Funt. And then I became a member of the Voice of America, State Department, in 1950, and then eventually went to Korea, became a war correspondent. And while I was there, I got married to an American lady, Gloria June Benson. And she flew over, we got married in 1953, and I quit the Voice of America. And I came back, we took a long 4-month trip around the world, a sort of our honeymoon. I came back to New York with a new wife and needing a job. So I went to see CBS, head of CBS News. He said, yes, maybe. Then he got fired the day after he interviewed me. Swear to God. Not because, I don't think it was because he did, but he did get fired. So now I had a wife, no job, and no savings. We had spent that all on that 3 or 4-month trip around the world. But there was a new thing called educational television. And those stations hadn't gone on the air yet, but they were interesting. And one of the most interesting things is somebody in the VOA said they're looking for somebody to host a children's show in St. Louis, 5 45-minute shows a week to produce and host. I was totally qualified. I had never done television. I had never performed as a personality. And I had no interest in doing kids shows. Perfect. So I wrote them a letter. And they sent me back and they were saying, okay, fly out here, we'll give you an audition. And I sent them back a letter in my most genuine manner. I don't have enough money to fly out. And for some reason they said, okay, we'll split the bill with you. So I did fly out and I did audition. And the man who was in charge of that took me to lunch after that audition and said, well, we've had a lot of people trying out for this show. And pretty much all of them have been smoother and glibber than you. I was not totally surprised by that. But then he followed by saying, but whatever it is you're going to become, I think you're just at the beginning, so if you want the job, it's yours. I give you this story again to show you how unpredictable life can be. If they said, you don't get the job, who knows what I am. If I don't go to NYU and see, go to textile, this doesn't happen. And yet here I am talking to you because you remember growing up watching Wonderama. I presume that's why most of you do. Now, Wonderama was in itself an extraordinary moment in television time and in the history of our country in terms of who we were and what we were doing at that time. We had a limited number of outlets. New York actually had 7 stations, which was a lot. Most of the cities had 2 or 3. We only had 3 networks. And you had no other means of amusing yourselves outside the home on your own. No computers, no cell phones, no games you could play on computers and so on. So when you were watching television in those days, it was sort of all-consuming because the distractions available to you were very, very few. Now, a few years ago, I got a phone call from some people saying they had just bought Wonderama and were going to start a new Wonderama and they wanted me to be involved. I said, what do you mean bought Wonderama? What was that? Well, we bought the title. I said, well, what do you think the title means? There was a Wonderama several before I took over. There was a Wonderama after I took over. Each one was totally different. And so what is it you think? Well, they kept calling me and offering me anything if I would stay attached. So I finally met with them, and I realized in going through that procedure that the chances of anybody being able to do again what we did in the 60s was just absolutely almost nil. Today, you suck the air out from between words because you're afraid that if you take a breath, what you have in your hand goes click and you're off. And because today the children have so many more opportunities to divert themselves with the computers, with the games, with the electronic, there's a plethora of alternatives in their lives. And the idea that you can sit around and let that silences hang in the air that I did when I taught with the kids is pretty much, nil now. So I didn't want anything to do with that. The other thing is, I know what I created, and I'm willing to live with that. I don't know what you're going to create, and I don't want to be responsible for that. So go with God, be good. They're somewhere out there. I think they're on Channel 11 locally, and they are somewhere at 6 o'clock on Saturday night, and an hour show. I mean, it's not a terrible show. They sent me a print. But it's as far away from Wonderama Sylvia Kid show as you could get. It's constant energy being exuded, constant bombardment of impulses and stuff, so that nobody will turn you off. The other thing was, remember, in those days, you didn't have an automatic turner, so you were sitting on your sofa or your bed, wherever you were when you were watching. If you wanted to get rid of it, you had to get up and walk over to the television set and turn it off and turn it on. That was already too much trouble. So that was another factor in what we were able to do. And then we had all those hours. But the other factor that I did not realize till I wrote my book, was that one of the things that made my show, our Wonderama show, different. Well, let me explain it. There were 3 other shows on the network, on the station. As you know, there was Soupy Sandy Becker, Chuck McCann. Incidentally, Soupy, Sandy, Sonny, and Chuck. I used to say, there's not a decent first name among us, Really. Now, Sandy and Soupy and Chuck were great entertainers. And the kids loved them, as well they should have. But the kids were their audience. And these people had immense talent. They did puppets, they threw pies, whatever they did. They were there to entertain you, and you were entertained by them. The hidden asset I have, is I have absolutely no talent. I don't sing, I don't dance, at least not so you want to watch it. I don't make puppets, I don't throw puppets. So what did I have? I had 4 hours. I had a studio full of cameras and cameramen and a director, and me, and no production budget. What the bloody heck was I going to do with this new show? He called me up and said, please, we want to raise the intellectual level of the show that's currently on. Would you be interested? Well, I had already done a series for CBS in the 50s, Let's Take a Trip, which was a pretty prestigious show. It didn't get a lot of ratings, but pretty prestigious. It was the first actual weekly remote location show done on television. And in those days, when we did research, when we did remote, I mean, the cameras were the same cameras we had in the studios. The big cameras trundled on those tripods, and the coaxial cables were yay thick. And you went out into these locations, and you had to set up. That was amazing. And there was always a camera was going to go out at some point during the show. And you always had to be adaptable on a live half-hour show. Anyway, I had done that. And did I want to be in a show that had cartoons, a local show? I had a lot of misgivings about that. But then I figured, okay, I'll try it. And it took me maybe a few months to figure out what Wonderama could be. And then I realized, it was you. It was my asset in that studio with the kids. And the interior lives you all had. And when I figured that one out, and I realized that if I could gain your trust, and if you felt my respect, I could get inside your heads. I could listen to you. I could find out what was going on there. And that became the essence of Wonderama. And I have a few clips today that sort of remind you about where we were. Some of you may have seen these, they're on my website. But it's always fun for me and for you. Now, the sound is a little, in this cavernous auditorium, a little tough. I hope you can hear what were going on. The first clip coming up, I call Little Brown Eyes. I don't know her name, and I've never heard from her again. But it's my favorite. Why is it my favorite? Watch this, and you'll see the intimacy that we were able to develop. Her total trust in sharing with me her life in the regard that we were talking about. And how the studio has melted away. The cameras are gone, the lights are gone, the other kids are gone. There's just little brown eyes and me having this conversation in the middle of a television studio. So, okay, turn the lights down, if you will, and roll the first clip. And instantaneously, nothing happened. The lights come down, sound.
Word to get around here. Who are you gonna marry?
My friend, he's in my class. He used to be in my class. His name is Eric Webb.
Eric Webb, how old is Eric?
I think he's 7 3/4.
He's older than you.
Yes.
Oh, it's always nice to know an older man. Why do you like him?
I don't know.
Well, what is there about him that makes him special?
Well, he's strong. And,
Is he polite? No, he's not polite, but he's strong, yes.
but when I'm in school with him, I go to his lunch table and I sit with him, and he's always playing with his friends, and he's always talking about fresh things, and he's always like, if he had some bread, he'd stick his finger through it.
Oh, he sounds like a delightful person. Well, Eric, is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, I hope you and Eric remain good friends for a long time. Is he still in your class?
No,
Do you see him at all?
sometimes at lunch.
At lunch. You look forward to lunch, huh? To being able to see him. Well, I think Eric is very lucky to have a friend like you. And I hope you remain good friends, okay?
Mm-hmm. And he's very small, but he's very cute.
Okay. I like Eric, and I've never even met him. You're small, but you're cute, too.
I was going to bring him over, but my sister, she was so nutty, she lost 2 tickets, and I had to let her borrow one of mine, so I couldn't invite her.
Oh, that's dreadful. I would have enjoyed meeting Eric. Will you come back someday and bring Eric with you? I hope so. We'll make arrangements for that, okay? I certainly would like to meet Eric. Matter of fact, would you like to take a present home to him? Do you think you'd like a Hebrew National snack pack?
Yeah, but your lack of recognition about the Hebrew National Snack Pack obliterated her tagline when she said to me, but he's not